Before we start today, I have to tell you about State Farm agent Brian McDevitt. A lot of our listeners have gone to him for all their insurance needs, and he's been very helpful in getting them the coverage they deserve. There's no games with Brian. He's just here to help and make sure you feel safe. So if you have insurance needs and you haven't called him yet, what are you waiting for? Dial up the number, 630-796-2662. That's 630-796-2662. Or visit him online at ryanismyagent.com. That's ryanismyagent.com. And make sure to mention Sports Talk Chicago. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Sports Talk Chicago. Here with Jon Zaghloul, and we are back and ready for today's special guest. He's the Bears beat writer for the Chicago Tribune and a contributor to ESPN 1000. Please welcome Dan Wiederer to the program. Dan, it's great to have you on. How are you?
John, I'm doing great. Hope you're enjoying your summer so far.
I'm really enjoying it. How's yours?
Good. It's nice to get back out in the world a little bit, play some golf, get out and went to a Cubs game with my son recently. So everything's coming back little by little.
What stood out to you so far most at OTAs, being there and being at practice every day?
Well, I think when the OTAs started, the first thing that jumped out to you was the lack of defensive participation and how many key defensive starters were not in attendance. Really, Roquan Smith was the only core member of the defense that came to all the OTAs and the minicamp. The defensive turnout was much better at the mandatory minicamp. You throw mandatory behind the title of something, and all of a sudden the attendance goes up, believe it or not. And the defense played pretty well in the practices we were able to watch a week ago. And then obviously I think, John, all the focus in this entire city for the foreseeable future is going to be on Justin Fields. And what does he look like? How does he look? What is Andy Dalton going to do to be a reliable placeholder? And can the Bears make this situation work in concert with the plan that Matt Nagy sort of has envisioned for bringing Justin Fields' development along?
How would you describe the quarterback competition at camp right now?
Yeah, I wouldn't describe it as a competition because, as you've heard from the head coach himself, they are going through this with the plan to have Andy Dalton be their week 1 starter, hopefully their week 2 starter, hopefully their week 3, 4, 5, 6 starter, if he can play at a high enough level that allows them to oversee Justin Fields' development at the rate that they think is most sensible for Justin Fields. This isn't about holding Justin Fields back. It's about making sure that he doesn't have to feel this ticking clock and that, that Kiefer Sutherland 24 clock beeping in the back of his head as he tries to go through the steps of developing. And there's a lot for rookie quarterbacks to take on as they come into this league. And every team handles it different. Every organization has a different plan. For the Bears and Matt Nagy and this coaching staff, they firmly believe that if they can give Justin Fields a longer on-ramp, it's going to be better to his long-term future. And so for right now, it's not really a competition. It's getting Andy Dalton ready to start the season, and then it's overseeing Justin Fields' development on sort of a parallel track. And as things sort of progress and evolve, then perhaps we're going to get more into that conversation on, okay, which guy is more equipped to lead this football team to wins, but we're not at that point yet.
What benefits come with sitting a rookie quarterback versus playing him week 1 and having him get reps?
It's comfort. Really, it's comfort. It's the ability for a guy to be able to, again, just cross that bridge at a pace that doesn't feel stressful, that doesn't feel harrowing. Justin Fields told us coming out of minicamp that he's still trying to figure out how to call a play in a huddle, right? They ran a lot of no huddle at Ohio State. And so there's these basic boxes on the checklist that he's trying to check off right now. He's going to check them off in due time. It's just a matter of how many of those do you need to check off to be ready to start and play at a high level in the NFL. And there's a lot that goes with it. If you get in the huddle and you call one wrong word in a long play call, the whole play could blow up, right? And so you want to make sure that is comfortable for the quarterback. That's just one small thing on this checklist, as I mentioned. And so that's one benefit, is just the comfort and the lack of pressure that goes with it. The other part of it is just understanding that now you can sit behind Andy Dalton and you can watch him prepare. You can learn what it's like to prepare in training camp. You can learn what it's like to prepare in the regular season. What do you do to dissect an opponent in week 1? What do you do after you either win or lose that season opener to come back, to correct your mistakes, to build on your successes? All of those things, the chance to learn that from a guy who's done it for a decade in this league, also valuable in the Bears' eyes. And so, listen, I tell people all the time, Justin Fields is going to make his first NFL start at some point in 2021. It's coming, and it's coming soon. It just might not be as soon as everybody wants. And so if everybody can take that deep breath and feel that little bit of patience, the time is coming, and the time will be very exciting when it does come.
Do you think week 4 could be a possibility against the Detroit Lions? I've heard a lot of people say that could be a target date.
I don't know that there's necessarily a set target date. I certainly think that's within the realm of possibility for certain that when October comes and if they feel like Fields has done everything they've asked him to do, then they're going to be ready to turn him loose. There's nothing in it for anyone to just sort of hide him for the long term. There's really not. And so if he's ready to play winning football, this coaching staff will be ready to judge that. I just think we don't know enough yet. And after a couple weeks of OTAs, remember, there was a full week of OTAs that was canceled by this coaching staff as a little bit of a, an olive branch, I guess you'd say, or a favor to some of the players to keep the offseason a little lighter. Well, that means you're going to go into training camp with, 6 weeks of camp with 3 preseason games. And all of those things are going to tell us a lot more about Fields' readiness. And then once we get to Labor Day weekend and can kind of survey the scene from there, it'll make a lot more sense on where he's at and where those projected timelines may come in.
Dan Wiederer here on Sports Talk Chicago. Dan, what excites you specifically about Fields just in general in his game?
Yeah, it's real easy. It's this high level athleticism. It's this proven playmaking production at the college level. And when you're a young quarterback who's going to make mistakes, who's going to make bad reads, who's going to get in trouble in places, to have the ability to get out of that trouble on your own and turn what would be a sack or a sack fumble or a turnover into maybe a 5 or 6 yard scramble, all of a sudden that makes everyone feel a little bit calmer, a little bit more comfortable. And so that playmaking, artistry that Justin Fields has is very obvious. The other part is just the size, speed, arm strength, deep ball ability that he has. I've told people that Justin Fields is the same size as Eddie George was coming out of Ohio State when he was coming out. He runs a faster 40 time than Eddie George had coming out. And oh, by the way, he can throw a deep ball 60 yards down the field on a line with great arm strength and great accuracy. And now all of a sudden you say, boy, this is quite a piece of clay to have a chance to mold. And now it's up to Matt Nagy and his coaching staff to mold that the right way.
Do you trust them to mold him correctly?
I mean, you certainly have to leave yourself skeptical, right? Because we understand that Justin Fields would not be here if Mitch Trubisky turned into the quarterback that everyone told us he was going to turn into when the Bears drafted him and when they tried to develop him after year 1, year 2, into year 3, and obviously eventually into year 4. And so Matt has a lot to prove. He does on that level. He has to prove that he can put together an offense that can finish in the top 15 of the league, right? In production, that's points, that's yards, that's red zone, that's third down, all of those things that come with it. I don't know that trust is something that the Chicago fan base is ready to just give out blindly at this point. And so they're going to have to earn that trust, and they're going to have to earn it by bringing his kid along at a rate that other people can see. Oh yeah, that's progress. Oh yeah, that's there. Oh yeah, he's going to be a guy that can earn a second contract, a guy that can be a starter for us and a high level starter for 10 years. But at this point, there's not enough to go on to say, yeah, I trust them to turn him into an all-pro.
Well, they've spoiled him more time, though, right, as a coach. Like, you'd have to think he has at least 1 or 2 more years now as the Bears head coach to develop Fields.
Well, what I've told everybody is that so much of 2021 is going to come down to what does Justin Fields look like around Christmas time, right? How is Justin Fields playing in that last stretch of December? How is he playing at the close of the regular season in January? And really very little else with the long term of this direction matters, because that's what this season is about. Most people, when the schedule came out, you look around at the projections for what people see this Bears team as. A lot of people see him as 8-9, 9-8, kind of on that fence. And so you compare that with the mushrooming excitement that's been around the city since draft weekend, and you say, okay, the reason there's such a high level of excitement for a team that might finish around 500 or below and miss the playoffs is because people believe that Justin Fields has the talent to be something really special. And so again, now we get into this micro view on his development through 2021. And when we get toward the tail end of that regular season, there better be signs, right, that it's in there. He doesn't have to be a finished product. He doesn't have to be a proven every week difference maker at that point, but there better be signs in there that this draft pick was a good one and that he's ready to take his development up.
Do you think it'd be acceptable for the Bears to go 8-9, to miss the playoffs, but to know that the year after, Justin Fields is ready to lead them to a playoff appearance?
Yeah, I do. And I think that's something that this coaching staff and really this front office brought up after the 2020 season ended and they got back from that playoff loss in New Orleans, and there was the closed door meetings at Hallis Hall with George McCaskey and Ted Phillips trying to figure out the direction of this franchise. And I think Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace both said, listen, we are going to do everything we can in this offseason to fix the quarterback position, whether that's free agency, whether that's the draft, whether it's a trade, whether it's some combination of those things together, which it ended up being with Andy Dalton and Justin Fields. We're going to put everything we can into fixing this quarterback position. But part of that is if we're going to draft a guy and we're going to use capital to go up at number 11 and get a guy that we believe in, well, now we have to be able to oversee his development without feeling like it's win now or the trap door opens beneath us and we're all fired and we're all gone. And so if you have that understanding within an organization that right now the long-term stability and direction of this franchise is entirely dependent on whether this selection of this quarterback is correct, then you have to be able to take off those horse blinders and you have to be able to look from 30,000 feet above and see, okay, sure, maybe we were 8-9, maybe we were 9-8, but Justin Fields looks ready to have that second year jump. And if that's the case, then all of a sudden you can start dreaming those championship dreams and start dreaming about those playoff berths again.
Dan Wiederer, you're on Sports Talk Chicago. Dan, besides quarterback, what concerns you about the Bears for this season?
Yeah, one thing that excites me is that Sean Desai, as defensive coordinator, certainly seems to have the belief of the players that are going to be playing for him. I think there's an excitement that this defense can produce more of those splash plays, the takeaways, the sacks, the game-changing plays that haven't happened enough the last 2 years. But that said, you still have to make sure that Akeem Hicks has still got fuel in the tank at his age, right? You have to make sure that Eddie Goldman is indeed going to report to training camp, which the Bears have promised, but Eddie's unexcused absence from minicamp was a head scratcher and raised a red flag. Can Robert Quinn give you anything? Well, he misses minicamp practices all week because he's dealing with a lower back strain. That's not a good sign for a guy whose production last year was nowhere near what anyone wanted it to be. And so now you're talking about a defense that was the best in the league, at least top 3 in 2018, and now has come back a little bit the last 2 years into a defense that's still good, but not dominating. And you say, okay, there are some concerns there. You don't want the window to close on a championship level defense while you're waiting for your quarterback to develop. And that's a concern for me that by the time Justin Fields is ready, the defense will be back to middle of the road and it'll be the same old story in Chicago where you can never get things to time up in a way that propels that high level success that this city's been starving for really the better part of 35 years.
Do you think personally that the window is closed? Like, could we ever see the Bears replicate 2018 or is that pretty much over right now?
Well, it depends on your top-tier playmakers being top-tier playmakers on an every-week basis. And so Khalil Mack can't get to the end of 2021 and not have double-digit sacks, right? You can tell me all you want about, he's seeing a lot of double teams and he's got nicks and bruises and whatnot. He was paid a few years ago as the highest-paid defensive player in the league, and that was for a reason to change games every week. So he has to do that. Eddie Jackson has to be the player that you paid him to be. Roquan Smith has to continue ascending off of a really, really brilliant 2020 season. You have to have that group of playmakers, those guys that you believe can be all pros, play at an all pro level. If they don't, now all of a sudden you come back again and sure, is it fun to be a number 9 or a number 10 or a number 11 defense? Yeah. Does it win you championships? It doesn't. And so the goal now for Sean Desai is to try to figure out ways on a weekly basis to put his elite playmakers in position to change games. And again, as we talked about a minute ago, that means sacks, it means interceptions, it means fumbles, it means defensive touchdowns. 2018, those were coming every week. 2019 and 2020, they weren't. And we saw what that meant to the long-term future of the team in those seasons.
What about the run game? What do you expect from them this year?
You really felt like there were some positive things in those last 6 weeks of the regular season a year ago. You felt like David Montgomery emerged into the player that the Bears believe he can be, and that the Bears committed themselves to giving David Montgomery a more featured role. And so when you see that and you say, okay, now we're going to put him in a backfield that, oh, by the way, has Damian Williams, who's an electric player when you can turn him loose, and Tariq Cohen should be coming back off the ACL injury. Okay, reason to believe that the running game should be improved in 2021. Pair that with an offensive line that seemed to find itself a little bit down the stretch of 2020, and you get that extra surge of optimism that, yeah, okay, now we can make strides up front in addition to our backs, and now we can make the running game a strength for us rather than something that we're trying weekly to get unlocked. That's a big deal for this Bears offense, to be able to have a reliable running game that can carry them in certain weeks. And so that's up to Matt. It's up to those backs. And then it's up to that offensive line. And right now, John, you have to figure out whether Tevin Jenkins, the second-round pick, can get himself ready to play starting quality left tackle as soon as possible. And that's another huge question mark for a team that has reasons to feel optimistic, but still has a ton of question marks facing it heading into training camp.
So with that in mind, then, what's your overall expectation for the Bears in 2021?
I think when the schedule came out, I threw the record in at 8-9. I feel like they are going to be very similar to what we've seen the last couple of years in terms of just being that middle of the road team. And it's going to be a little bit painful at times because people are tired of win-loss, lose 6 in a row here, lose 4 in a row in one season, 6 the next, whatever it is. People don't want those long losing streaks. They're painful, but this team just, and as you listen, you lost Kyle Fuller, right? That's a starting cornerback that you have to replace this year. You have to figure out what your offense is doing well in ability to get things to sync up. And so until further notice, I'm kind of hanging around that 500 territory and waiting for the Bears to tell me that I should believe otherwise. But that's where I am here in June. And I reserve the right to change that opinion when we get a little deeper into August and we've seen a little bit more in training camp from this group.
What if Aaron Rodgers doesn't come back? Does that change your opinion?
Well, it certainly changes the entire landscape of the division. And it's one of these storylines that you wake up every morning and you say, my goodness, the Packers still don't know whether Aaron Rodgers will take another snap for him. And you talk to enough people with enough knowledge in Green Bay, and they tell you pretty definitively, Aaron's not coming back. The page is turning, and this is going to be Jordan Love's show when September rolls around. And it's so hard to believe and hard to fathom for folks that have lived in Chicago and seen 30 plus years of Hall of Fame quarterbacking from the guys in the green and gold that you say it can't be real, right? It can't be real. They always start a Hall of Famer. If that is indeed the case, well, then the division opens wide open. And I know 3 other teams, the Lions, the Vikings, and the Bears that are saying, yeah, boy, Aaron, I don't think the Packers have treated you right. You might want to get a new start elsewhere, and just kind of keep planting those seeds in his head so that his days of torturing the division are in the rearview mirror.
Do you think that could expedite Fields? Like if Green Bay is not there and it's pretty much an open division, do you see them maybe putting in Fields earlier and saying, let's win now, let's go for it this year?
I know what you're saying. I don't see those two things going hand in hand because I think this coaching staff has to have a very long-term focus on what's best for Justin and what's best for this offense. And I don't think anything that happens in Green Bay will change that. But to your point, there is a human nature thing that comes into that. And if you are hanging around in the division and you're seeing some signs of life from this team and you say, man, we just really need that sort of TNT jolt from our quarterback position, then maybe you do. Make that move earlier than you wanted to. It's fascinating. It really is because it just, I tell you, I think about it every morning and it doesn't sink in that Aaron Rodgers might not play another down there and how much that would change this division. And if Justin Fields then is the guy that you believe him to be in the Bears organization, well, hey, guess what? Maybe now you can be the Packers for the next 10 to 15 years and be the team that, goes to the playoffs pretty much every year and wins a handful of playoff games and gets into that NFC Championship game and gives yourself a chance. You start dreaming those big dreams and you say, man, that's pretty intriguing. And then you have to take that shot of reality and say, that's a long way off and there's a lot of hurdles to clear. But I understand the fantasy world and the fun that comes with dreaming those biggest dreams, given all the things that have happened here in the last 3 or 4 months around the division.